In this video, we are going to be building a skate rail. So it's going to be pretty basic, pretty general. It's just going to be an easy first project to make and to sell. There are different variations that you can build this, but this is how I want to do it. And from the research I found online, this is a pretty common rail size and height. So it's going to be 8 foot long total. So we're going to have one piece at 8 foot long. That's going to be 2 3/8 round 14 gauge. That's going to be the main rail. And then we're going to have two pieces cut at 15 5/16. That's going to be 1 5/8 round 14 gauge. That's going to be these vertical pieces here. From there, we're going to have two 16-inch pieces, and that's going to be 3" by 3/16 flat, and that's just going to be the base there. Overall, the rail is going to be 17 9/16 of an inch and 8 foot long. Right here, this 15 5/16. So I want this to be overall 15 inches, but this piece has to be coped or notched to fit well with this rail on top. So to counter for that notch, I am going to add 5/16 of an inch, because with what I've found, 1 5/8 material, when you do a perfect notch for it, you lose 5/16 of an inch. So that's why I have this. If you decide to do this all square, which is another great option to where you won't have any copes, this could be different. It could be a straight 15, or if you wanted to make it shorter. Like I said, there are a lot of different variations, but I'll let you decide on that. But square might be a great option too. If this is one of your first projects that you're doing, it'll be a little less technical without having to do that cope or saddle. So let's get in, let's source our material, and then we'll start cutting, laying out, and then we'll weld it, and then we'll paint it, and then it'll be a finished product. So we now got our material all sourced. We got our 2 3/8, we got our 1 5/8, and then we have our 3" by 3/16 flat plate. So we're gonna lay it all out, get it all cut, and then from there we'll start welding. So I'll start with this 2 3/8. This is gonna be an 8 foot piece. We'll cut that there. Now that we laid out all of our pieces, we're going to start cutting. We're going to be cutting this with a chop saw. There's just straight cuts, so no 45s or anything. So let's start cutting. There's going to be 1, 2, 3, 5 cuts in total. Should be pretty quick and pretty simple. Next step, we are going to start prepping everything to weld. So we got our 15 5/16 of an inch piece. We need to grind all the burrs off that and then get one end notched or coped. And then we just need to get the burrs and everything off everything else, just so that it welds up nice and looks good. So we're gonna clean everything up before we start welding. You could see here, I ground down the middle of this 3" plate. That's where I'm going to weld these pieces to. So you just want to make sure that that's cleaned up nice so that you can get a good weld on there. So you could see here, I got my pieces that need coped. I set them in here, started grinding them. I used my 16-inch, 3-inch plate to clamp these down basically so they couldn't move while I was grinding. And I'm just going to grind them, get start a circumference around this, start kind of grinding it down and just seeing how it's going to fit. There are like guides that you could put around these called wraparounds. This is 1 5/8 pipe that you could get, and it could stencil it out and trace it around, and you just cut around that. You could get pipe notchers, but in this case I'm just using a grinder, and all I'm going to be doing is basically just grinding it out until it fits perfectly around my 2 3/8. So you could see here, I got both my pieces ground down and they fit really nice. So now they are basically going to be ready to weld. The first step of the welding process, what we are going to do is be welding our coped 15-inch piece to our 3-inch by 3/16 inch plate. You can see this, I have this this 1/8 inch flat plate here. So I'm gonna mark center, basically find center, get it all lined up, and then what I'm gonna do is clamp. So if you were to weld this flat and you weld it pretty hot, this plate could curl. So you always want to kind of counter that with something so that it doesn't bow and warp on you. So basically we will get our clamps, clamp that down. This is going to be important too, because when you finish your rail, it's going to teeter on you and rock, so you really definitely want to consider doing this. It'll definitely help in the end product. So we got that there. Now I'm going to mark center on my piece. Center is 8 inches. So I cut them at 16. Get my square. Finish that mark. And then this is a 3-inch plate, so I'm going to want to go center of the plate 2, which is 1.5 inches. Get our 2 marks there. Since I ground it down, it's kind of hard to see, so I'll use a white pen on this one. And then we'll do the same thing on the next one. See that there? Do the same here. From there, we'll basically be ready to weld these on. I'm just going to want those to be pretty center. and you're going to want to make sure your cope is going perfectly in line with this. It's pretty easy to eyeball it. Just make sure that your cope is lined up and basically going straight. So to tack it first, I'm not going to clamp it down. I'm going to tack it. Make sure that I'm nice and true. Make sure I'm nice and center. Make sure my cope is where I want it. That looks really good right there. So what I'm going to do is tack that first, and then I'll clamp these down, and then I'll put a full weld around it. Perfect. So we got the first one done. We'll move to the second one. Right, so we got that finished. So now I'm gonna just tack or clamp these down, and I'll get a full weld around that piece. After it's welded, sets nice. So that's why it's important to use basically a piece just to counter that heat, just so it doesn't warp on you. So we'll move on to the second piece. We'll get that welded. That one sits nice as well. So we got those two pieces. Now we just need to weld our 2 3/8 inch piece to that, and we are good to go. So I got my pieces welded here. It turned out nice. So what I'm gonna do on this rail, I'm gonna work off of a straight edge. So this table is nice and true and square. So I'm gonna work on this outside edge here. So basically what I'm going to do is measure in 8 inches on both sides, and that's going to be to the edge of my plate. So let's go 8 inches here, do 8 inches here, do the same thing over here, 8 inches and 8 inches. We'll get my big square out. And we'll run our line for the 16-inch piece there. Do the same thing on this side. Alright, so now that we got those pieces basically where we want them, we will line it up. Get it square on the edge, square on my line, and then we'll put a clamp down. Happy with that, where that is. One thing to make sure of too, just make sure your table's nice and clean. Make sure there's no debris or anything on the table from any cuts or grinds. Awesome, and then we'll grab our top rail, which is 2 3/8. Just like so. And from the outside here to the outside of this leg just needs to be about 8 inches. Actually, sorry, this is center on the plate, so it's gonna look more like closer to about 9 1/4 or 9 inches. Yeah, closer to 9 1/4 from the outside here to the outside of this 1 5/8. So we're about 9 1/4 there. Looks pretty good. About 9 1/4 there. Looks good. We will get the level. We'll just make sure that before we tack it that's level. So you can see the level here. I'll get it about where I want it, and we'll tack it. Perfect. We'll do the same on this side. Get it nice and level. Right where I want it. Perfect. So from there, that is ready to weld. You could leave it clamped and weld it, or you can take your clamps out since it's all tacked together. I only have one tack on this piece, so if you do untack it, you might just want to put one more tack on the back side. Cool. And then I'll just lay it flat and we'll do the welds that way. Now that we got our skate rail welded, we're going to clean it up with the wire wheel, and then we're going to wipe it down with some vinegar and a rag, and then it'll be ready to paint. So I'm using a wire wheel to clean this up, just to kind of buff my welds and get some of the spatter off. And there's not much, but I'll just briefly go over it, and then we'll wipe it down and we'll be good to go. Grinded down, cleaned up. Now I got my vinegar and a rag. I'm going to start wiping it down. Basically get all the rust off and any grease or anything that's built up on the rail. We got the skate rail all welded, wiped down with vinegar. We got all the spatter off and everything with the wire wheel, so it is now ready to paint. The rail's nice and dry after I wiped it down, and so we are good to go. What I'm going to be using to paint this is a 2-in-1 paint and primer mix that you could buy at any hardware store. This is going to be a semi-gloss black paint. So let's get started. We'll paint it and it should turn out really nice.